Hello everyone, welcome back to live coverage of the 2020 season Grand Finals Rally Night, joined by the Hall of Famer Paolo Vita Damina Rosa. What a pleasure it is to have your company, Paolo, and the company of people around the world, wherever you're choosing to join us from this weekend. We certainly appreciate you tuning in to see all the latest developments in historic. We're about to get underway with two huge names of modern Magic. We've got Seth Manfield here, who is playing Jund Sacrifice. He's up against Luis Scott-Vargas. And Paolo, Luis Scott-Vargas got a little trick up his sleeve. He's playing a four-color mid-range deck that is basically Sultai, splashing white for a card that I suspect is going to be quite impactful in this matchup.
Yeah, and I mean, this is the matchup that is the reason for that card being splashed, right? You're sharing Implacable Earth. That stops basically the entirety of what Seth is trying to do, right? So this is the deck that Luis Scott-Vargas and his team built their list to beat, right? So he has to be pretty happy to be facing Seth here.
Yeah, I think that's exactly. He sees that go up on the virtual pairings board, and he's running around the room. He's high-fiving people, going, "Yeah, we did it. Don't even worry about it." And now Seth is also mulliganing as well. So already coming out the gates here, Scott-Vargas in a commanding position. You would have thought this looks like a decent six, though.
Yeah, and I would like to highlight this moment. This is a historical moment, not only because two titans of the game are playing, right? These are two of the best players ever, but also because Seth Manfield took a mulligan, right? You do not see these every tournament.
That's true.
It is a rare occurrence that Seth takes a mulligan. I was about to say it was, a very weird keep, but then he didn't keep.
No. Yeah, Seth is one of the least mulligan happy players on the face of this beautiful flat earth we live on. And
it really makes you think about, Seth mulligans less than anyone I know, and he also wins more than almost everyone I know. Is there a correlation to that, right? Maybe everyone should be mulliganing less.
As we all know, correlation does indeed imply causation. And I guess that's it. So there you go. You've got it from one of the greatest players of all time. Paolo Vita Damina Rosa, largely considered one of the greatest players to ever play the game. And he's telling you, never mulligan. Never mulligan. High-level strats with the best. No landers? Keep them. You'll be fine. You'll rip the lands you need. Don't even worry about it. Here's Dreadhorde Butcher getting in nice and early here for Manfield. And Scott-Vargas has got plenty of interaction of his own. He's got that Mythos, got that Extinction event. And we're going to see the Mythos of Nethro take care of this Butcher before it can get any more out of control.
Yeah, but a pretty horrible start for Luis Scott-Vargas here, right? He does have the Extinction event, but that doesn't even match up very well against what Seth is doing. And Seth does have the Collector Company. So Luis needs to find some action soon, right? Seth already has everything that he needs at this point, whereas Luis is kind of just looking for something here.
So, Woe Strider curves into Collector Company quite nicely, but Scott-Vargas now, the one who is going to have to find some kind of an answer, right? He's got that Extinction event, which isn't bad against this in this matchup against, you know, certain board states, obviously. But
yeah, here we see Seth, you know, pausing for a while before making his play, and obviously we know that this is the only play he's ever going to make, right? But Luis doesn't know, so he's trying to make Luis think that he has something else to play, right? A different choice.
I mean, it's either that or he's like drafting Cube on his other monitor. Like, that's
it could be that too.
That's also a real possibility for Luis Scott-Vargas. Like he could be on, you know, Magic the Gathering Online on his second screen. I'm not discounting that possibility when it comes to LSV.
Yeah, and here, obviously, Seth has a choice, right? He can play Collector Company now, which will guarantee that it resolves, but it will expose him to sorcery speed removal, right? Like that Extinction event. Or he can wait and just play that at the end of the turn, which I think is the better choice, because Luis Scott-Vargas doesn't actually have disruption, right? The only disruption he has is Aether Gust. So if you get Company Aether Gusted, it's not the end of the world. You get to cast it again, right, the following turn. So it is much better to play around the mass removal spells. And here we can see that he got paid off big, right? If he just cast that at the end of his turn, Luis would have swept the board entirely with that Extinction event.
It's actually looking really good now with double Mayhem Devil. I mean, you know, we put Scott-Vargas in a commanding position in this matchup just based on the fact that, you know, Luis built his deck to beat Jund Sacrifice, but now there's 2 copies of Mayhem Devil. There's a Woe Strider, Midnight Reaper in hand, claim the first one, and whoa. Back it up. What?
Well, he's just going to die. Yeah.
What? How? When? Where? What? How?
Well, Seth can just attack with everything and, you know, sacrifice some creatures. Seth could even play the Midnight Reaper and give engage to claim for the first one.
A second ago. What happened there?
Yeah, I mean, that is the power of that deck, right? The Mayhem Devil does do a lot of damage very quickly. And Corval wasn't even involved, right? Normally when these things happen, it's because you're like, oh, I'm super safe. I'm at 23 life. My opponent has
that's
only
what I was thinking. I was
and you're like, then your screen explodes and you are at minus 13. Right?
I was leaning back in my chair. I was getting comfy. You know, I was thinking about what I'm going to have for dinner. I was like, oh, this is going to be a long one. No worries at all. And then Seth just flips 2 Mayhem Devils and all of a sudden the game's over.
Yeah. And
unbelievable.
Seth, I mean, if Seth played a little bit differently there, he could have easily lost that game.
Yeah.
Right? If Seth just plays the company at the end of the turn, which it's not a completely unreasonable play, incorrect, I think, but there are reasons to make it, then I think he probably just loses, right? Because Luis just flips the board instead. So good play there by Seth, who is, I believe, sideboarding in almost his entire sideboard, right? Other than Liliana's defeat. Well, I guess Red Cap Melee stayed there too. I can imagine he brought that in. But it looked like he was boarding in a lot of cards.
Yes, yeah, and you can see the 4 copies of Thoughtseize in Manfield's sideboard are going to be really important too in the opener as well. This looks like a decent enough hand to keep here. Yep, Seth doesn't have to think about it too long. But Luis has also got a decent enough starter as well here. He's got some interaction and, of course, a very powerful Nissa. Although I don't know how much longer this hand will stay intact, of course, with the double Thoughtseize.
Yeah, and Thoughtseize is a card that, yes, it is good versus the Sultai builds, but you're kind of just playing into their game, right? That deck is made to 1-for-1 you, right? It has a bunch of Thoughtseizes and counter spells and removal spells, and then it has cards that go over the top of it, like Uro, Krezis, and Nissa, right? So if you buy into their reactive game state, that is just what they are hoping the game develops to. So you use Thoughtseize as, a speed bump, kind of. Like, you want to take away whatever piece they're missing, right? If they have a hand that is a lot of reaction and 1 threat, which was what happened here, you just take away the threat, right? But if they only have 1 answer, then you take away the answer and you hope to kill them before they develop their stuff. But you're really not trying to play a Thoughtseize game plan here. Like, that is not a winning proposition versus this deck. He did bring in the Red Cap Melee.
Wow, yeah.
All right, well, that is how good the hate pick is.
That's what I was going to say. I think, like, the Red Cap Melee is they have to kill the 4/4, and Red Cap Melee, even though it's not built to kill a Selesnya creature, you just have to answer the pig.
Wow, that is awful. It doesn't even kill World, right? It is a big admission from Seth Manfield that's like, yeah, I just cannot bid the 8 pick, right? I have to have this card in my deck, because if you ever resolve that, you can't Priest of Forgotten Gods it, right? Because you need to sacrifice stuff.
Yep.
You can't Mayhem Devil it, because again, it requires you to sacrifice. You can't claim the Firstborn because it costs 4. So yeah, it's quite an interesting adaptation here by Seth Manfield.
Here's a Mayhem Devil now, one of the 2 that was in Manfield's hands, and Scott-Vargas happy enough to cycle away a Triumph for the turn. He does need some business. He's got that Hydroid Crisis, but really that's a turn 6 play. Hasn't found much in the way of action. Is this just a 1-for-1 with the Extinction event?
It is, yeah. And it doesn't look great for you to ever do that. But again, this deck thrives on 1-for-1s, right? It doesn't need its sweeper to bail it out like some of Zori's decks, right? The situation doesn't ever become, oh, my opponent has 30 things in play and I need this to save me. It's more like I just want to buy time for my big haymakers to win the game.
Yeah, because eventually, like if you play a Crisis for 4, draw a couple of cards, you'll find the Nisses, you'll find more removal, you'll find action that is going to be able to keep your head above water. So that's all that Scott-Vargas is doing right now. He's under the most amount of pressure. Finding Yashan wouldn't be too bad if it weren't for that red cap melee in hand.
Yeah, I mean, that is still not something that it's bad for Luis, right? Luis gets to draw 2 lands. Obviously, they're not spell or lands, but he gets to draw 2 of those. And Seth wastes a card and has to sacrifice a land. Seth is stuck on 3 lands, right? Because the pig isn't red. So the red cap melee does demand an extra sacrifice.
Look at this. The rich get richer. Hydroid Crisis for 4, draws 2 cards, and both of them are Hydroid Crises. And that's exactly what you want to see. I think we'll probably see one, if not both of them, bite the dust here. But as you've said several times already, PV, this is what Sultai is built to do. It is built to go 1-for-1, and it looks like quite happy to do that here.
Yeah, he does need something, because I mean that claim the Firstborn, right, is going to facilitate a big attack here, and he will be left with nothing, right? The other crises will be Thoughtseized. And it's interesting that the Reclamation Sage there, it is probably there are 3 Leyline of the Void and 1 Grafdigger's Cage in Lewis's deck. I'm not even sure he brought in the ley lines. I mean, they're okay. They're not the best, but Cage is just really unbeatable. So it is good to have an answer for that.
So attack for 7. And rather than another Thoughtseize, we're actually going to see red cap melee held up instead. As away goes the Mayhem Devil and, of course, that Pilfered Uro. So Scott-Vargas down to
he will generate 2 mana here, so he gets to Thoughtseize, and we'll probably see him play that Reclamation Sage.
Okay, I'm actually going to go for it. All right, interesting.
Mana.
I guess you look at that. No, you're not going to keep up the melee. All right, going to go just play a little Goblin Piker there. Extinction event off the top. Again, 1-for-1 removal, and things have got from bad to worse here for Scott-Vargas.
Yeah, I mean, he's probably going to fetch a land, cycle his Triumph, and see if he draws something, and if he doesn't, he's just going to play the Extinction event. Oh, he drew something.
Oh,
he's going to get red cap melee. But
I mean, it's gonna eat 4 damage, but
it might come as a shock to him, right? Seth still doesn't have lethal, but now he's very close, because now Luis is at 1, and it needs to draw an answer immediately.
Wow, red cap melee. Look at this. Let's have a look and see. No, LSV, cool as a cucumber. I guess he anticipated it. But away goes a land. 2-for-1ing yourself to get rid of that 4/4 pig. Of course, your deck just doesn't work without it. And now, Scott-Vargas needs something special. That's not it. That is not it. No. And that is going to do it here, as we see Luis Scott-Vargas go down 2 games to 0. I mean, we thought he was the clear favorite in this situation, built his deck to beat Jund Sacrifice, but it wasn't enough, PB.
Yeah, I mean, I think it still is, but we're talking very small margins, right? And no deck is just going to demolish another deck in this format. So you can definitely just win or lose with anything.
Yes, well, that's certainly what we saw there, and we're very lucky now because we get the chance to actually catch up with Seth Manfield. He sat down with Day 9 to discuss the win. Let's hear from them right here, right now.
Joining us is our round 2 winner, Seth Manfield. Congratulations, Seth, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Now, that was a pretty quick first match. Pretty quick second match against LSV. Is this typically how your Jund Sac matchups go?
I mean, this is how you want it to go, right? I was able to get that turn 4 company into 2 devils and just kind of, I mean, it was perfect because honestly, I don't think this matchup is actually that great for me. The way LSV build his deck. He's got a lot of Sharns and Extinction events for me.
Well, I want to ask about, in this format, it's both historic and standard. Is there a particular deck you're more comfortable with? Is there concern you have in one of the metagames?
Well, honestly, when I looked at the deck list, I was most concerned about historic, but I'm also not super comfortable with either choice.
Really? Okay.
So, but it's working out so far, obviously. I'm just not someone that likes to get comfortable in general, though. So I'm not gonna underestimate my opponents here, but I'm very happy with my start because I thought, because I played Omnath in the first round, beat it, and now beat this 4-color build of Luis's. And those were two matchups I was scared of. So to have beaten both 2-0, 2-0 makes me start to my expectations have gone up a little bit.
Well, I have one final question for you. You're one of the only people that submitted no Omnaths at all in either format. Do you think this card is a weakness? Why no Omnath?
Sorry, what does Omnath do? I didn't even realize that was a card. No, I'm just kidding. No, I'm just kidding. I mean, obviously, Omnath was on everyone's radar. The card is just completely busted, but at the same time, I want to go against the grain. So I want to, once I can peg that everyone else is going to bring Omnath, I'm going to do whatever I can to try to figure out a way to go in the other direction, because I don't want to play mirror matches against these insane players. I want to find some other thing that's out there to be able to beat them with.
Well, Seth, thanks so much for joining us, and good luck in your next final historic round for the day. And let's head back to the caster desk.
We've got plenty more Magic to show you, my friends. We do hope you'll stay with us for more coverage of the 2020 season grand finals. We'll be back in just a few moments. We're going to take a quick break and then more historic action coming your way. So stay with us. We'll be back after this.
And I'm from Italy.
I am Michael Jacob. I'm 36 years old and I'm from the United States.
Salutations, fellow nerds, and welcome back to our virtual feature match area here. Friday night, joined by the Hall of Famer Paolo Vita Rosa, and we're going to check in with Luca Magni and Michael Jacobs as we continue our coverage of this event. Round number 2, our backup match between these two players, sees us looking at Azorius Control up against this Teemo combo, this Neo Storm deck that we've already had a look at today. We haven't seen a lot of control PV recently in Historic. A couple of people have been fiddling around with it, but it's certainly not the all-star that it could potentially be.
No, it isn't. And in fact, it was the worst performing deck at the Mythic Invitational, right? So it is a statement to bring it for this tournament here. But I think it could actually be better here than it was there, right? Because the metagame changed, right? The enemy changed, and the enemy is what defines the strength of a control deck, right? It's not only about what you're doing, it's about what other people are doing.
Yes, indeed. And how your answers match up against their threats, yeah.
And this is a matchup that I'm relatively confident that neither player has played. Because they might have played against the archetypes, right? The archetypes are pretty uncommon, right? So you could ladder for a week and not get paired against either the Neoform deck or the blue-white deck. But these players are also playing somewhat different versions of this deck. So even if they have played this matchup, it's not exactly how it's going to play out here. Because Michael Jacobs' version is completely different from any other Neoform version I've seen.
Yeah, I want to drill down on Jacob's list a little bit here. He is playing this Neo Storm deck that revolves around the combo between Seagate Stormcaller and Neoform. You can then go and get copies of Dualcaster Mage and Glasspool Mimic to make a bunch of 3/3s, and you give them all haste with Tuk Tuk Rubblefort. But there are a couple of interesting numbers in Jacob's list that I really wasn't expecting. Only 3 copies of Dualcaster Mage, only 3 copies of Neoform, with the 4th in the board because of the Bay of Wishes. Only 1 copy of Tuk Tuk Rubblefort as well. Kira, great Glass Spinner as well to protect it. And then 4 copies of Sphinx of Foresight.
Yeah, that is a card that you don't see very often ever since the Fires of Invention days. But I understand the appeal, right? It is a card that, well, in your opening hand, it helps you find your combo, which is exactly what you want. But it is also a 4-drop that you can get with Neoform in games where you cannot establish your combo, right? Because we saw Yukio Hiro's version. I think Yukio Hiro's version is really not well set up to winning the game through any sort of disruption. He really just wants to combo out. And ironically enough, it didn't have to in the second game against Brad. He just played as a lower deck. But in game 1, I think it really is an all-in combo deck. And Michael Jacobs' version is a little bit different, right? It has... Terror of the Peaks. It has Sphinx of Foresight. So you can actually just play a Sphinx of Foresight and Neoform that into a Terror of the Peaks, right? So you have these, you can play a Dualcaster Mage and use that to find a 5/5 Sphinx. So it's a very different list here that opens up, it's not as combo focused, I think. It opens up some more possibilities. And he plays Acceleration, doesn't play that much Disruption, you're relying on the Fate of Wishes instead. Right, if we look at Yukio Hiro's list, he has a Braid in his deck, right? Which means he can't actually just answer the Grafdigger's, which otherwise stops your combo. But Michael Jacob doesn't have that. He has to Fate of Wishes for an answer.
And let's talk about this Grafdigger's Cage, because I'm sure many people eyebrows shot straight up the top of their heads here as they saw, this is game 1. This is there's no sideboarding. And I can tell you that Luca Magni is playing 3 copies of Grafdigger's Cage in the main deck. And this is not something that we see very often, and says a lot about what the Historic format is trying to do. Why are we playing 3 main deck Grafdigger's Cages?
Yeah, I mean, it is quite good versus a lot of the field, right? It is, obviously, it's very good versus the Collected Company decks, any Bolas of Citadel decks. We didn't see any of those, but it is quite good there.
Yep.
And even when it's bad, it has some uses, right? If you think, oh, the Sultai that. Well, it's bad versus that, but it does stop Uro, right? So it's not completely dead, even when it's dead.
And then you think about the splash damage that it has on stuff like Omnath with Genesis Ultimatum, Goblins with Uro, any sacrifice deck with Cauldron Familiar, obviously. So Grafdigger's Cage, there aren't many matchups where it is completely dead, but it's still a liability playing a potentially do-nothing artifact in a control deck like this. But I don't know. I mean, if you're going to bring it in 80% of matchups, maybe you just want it in the main deck anyway. Here is an old favorite, Teferi, Hero of Dominaria. That's the name I've not heard in a long time, as we see the old Scourge of Standard back at it once again, untapping lands. And without any real answer to Teferi, this is a Planeswalker. If you weren't around for Dominaria Standard, this is a Planeswalker that can take over a game very swiftly indeed. It'd be very hard to answer, fella.
Yeah, it's a very, very powerful card. The reason you haven't heard his name in a long time is, again, because this deck didn't win a single game at the Invitational. But I mean, it is quite good now. It is a super strong card, right? We've had many Planeswalkers with this template, right? +1, draw a card, -3, deal with something, and ultimately win the game.
Yes.
And of all of them, Teferi is the best.
Yes.
Right? It's like you draw a card, but you also untap your mana, which means you can cast a removal spell or a counter spell, and then it actually gets rid of anything with a -3 ability and doubles up as a win condition because you never get decked if you have it, right? Because you can just use it on itself. So really a super strong card, format defining when it was in Standard, and it's no surprise that we see it in Historic.
Yeah, it's definitely more of a role player in Historic than it used to be in Standard, where it was just an absolute all-star. But it's still doing a lot of work here. Yeah, maybe a lot is generous. It's doing an amount of work. You know, it's retired. Yeah. Hey, he's retired. You know what? He's retired. He's done it. He's lived a rich and long and full life, and now he's enjoying his. You know, he's the kind. He gets called up every now and again. Hey, we need you. Oh, okay, yeah, I'll see if I can come in. I guess on Tuesday. Yeah, I got stuff later in the week. You know, he's not working full time anymore. But Teferi's still getting it done a little bit. Here's Shark Typhoon now, creating a 4/4 at instant speed in order to block this Fae of Wishes. Jacob does have the option to return it to hand, of course. He can discard 2 cards to bounce the Fae of Wishes before it gets eaten up, gobbled up by that Sharko. And I think that's exactly what's going to happen here. Giving up the opportunity to hold up double Absorb in order to get this Fae of Wishes off the battlefield here, PB. And now Granted, once again, going to pluck something from the sideboard. Let's see what it is. It could just be the Neoform. Yeah, look at this. Got the combo in hand. May as well go and get the Neoform and force your opponent to... all right, never mind. I mean, never forcing the combo through 3 copies of Absorb. Look at that. Plus the Grafdigger's Cage. In comes the Shark now. 4 damage clipping across, so the control deck getting a little more aggro here. You do like to see that, wanting to end the game nice and quickly. I guess at this point you feel very safe, as Luca Magni is sitting here behind 3 counter spells, behind a Grafdigger's Cage. I think he's in a position where he can afford to have a little more aggression, a little more assertiveness here. He's got another copy of Teferi in hand. I mean, look, this is exactly where the white-blue control player wants to be. Answers for days, threats on the table, the game more or less locked up. You'd think, look, Michael Jacobs fan in a vacuum, fantastic, great. Neoform, Seagate Stormcaller, ready to go. Let's have it. But as it is, the cards in play tell a very different story. Cast out now. Going to be cycled away. Finds a land. I think that's what he was looking for here. Still double Absorb up. Not to mention, of course, Teferi untapping that irrigated farmland. There's a Sphinx of Foresight. But we're going to see Fae of Wishes first here as a 1/4. Of course, Jacob having access to his sideboard really does change things. You can have a game 1 Grafdigger's Cage, but if your opponent can go to the sideboard to get, you know, a Blast Zone, for example, or a Buy Force out of it, then it's not 100%. It's not 100% to just lock up the game then and there. It does, of course, pose a real problem, and I think that was a very judicious Absorb there from Magni, who saw that the Granted may have stuck a spanner in the works there if it's resolved. In comes the Shark again, 3-turn clock.
Oh, hello, Riley. I think you lost me for a moment there.
We got you back, PV. We've got our Brazilian superstar back. And as you can see here, things going very, very well for Luca, who's just gone from strength to strength, leveraging counter magic. He's got pressure on the battlefield. And I would imagine this game is probably getting close to its conclusion.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it looks like Luca Magni is in a dominating position. These combo decks, they really do not have, you know, even though they are capable of, you know, some alternate gameplays, and they're really all in combo decks, right? This is not a Splinter Twin deck that can grind you out. This is just a combo deck, and there's too much stopping him right now, right? There's the Grafdigger's Cage, yeah, there's an answer, but then there's the Absorbs and stuff like that. So the Teferi is about to ultimate, right, and start getting rid of the lands too. So the writing is really on the wall here.
So there's that Blast Zone. That does get rid of the Grafdigger's Cage, but I mean, it's going to be too little too late here because, of course, double Absorb in hand means that there's just nothing doing here. And, I mean, you can go for it. You can go for the Seagate Stormcaller, but whether you absorb this, whether you absorb the Neoform... I mean, you have to absorb this, right? Because otherwise there's 2 copies of the Neo form? No, it's still not enough. It doesn't really matter. You've got counterspells for days. This game's over.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, if you don't absorb this, then the copy happens, right? But if you counter the copy, then the second Neostorm resolves and just brings in a 2/2 creature, right?
Yes.
It doesn't actually. You need that thing to be on the stack for it to resolve, for the combo to materialize.
Yeah, and we can see that MJ is going to pack it up after Magni, and it managed to pull together a draw that was ultimately most efficacious. And so now we move to sideboarding. We can see what these two players, how they want to reposition their decks. Looks like those Grafdigger's Cages are, of course, here to stay, all-stars in this matchup. Taking out Baffling End for Magni, and instead has brought in... I'm having trouble tracking exactly which cards were brought in there. Jacob,
yeah, I mean,
a couple of things there. Akira, a Sphinx of Foresight.
Yeah, there's currently a very large number of Wrath of Gods in Luca Magni's deck, which is a bit surprising to me. I think you do maybe want some of them, right? Because you don't want to... Your whole deck is geared towards beating the combo.
Yeah,
right?
And you can see now, comparing the pre and post board configurations of of Luca Magni here, he's brought in 3 copies of Dovin's Veto, an extra copy of Essence Scatter as well. So it does really look like he's wanting to contest things on the stack, and I think that's quite wise. You know, a Wrath of God removal spells, you've already talked about the fact that they don't always get the job done against Neostorm, and fighting on the stack, I think, is where you want to be in this position.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, you want to stop the carded combos, right? It's very hard to disrupt the combo once it gets going, so you want to stop it from happening. And this deck has a lot of ways to stop it from happening, right? All the counter spells just do a lot of work. So I can understand the Wrath of God. It's like the other 56 cards in my deck are going to make sure you don't combo me out, right? So I just have to make sure I don't lose to random 2/2s, right? I don't want you to go opt dual caster mage and then attack me to death with 2/2s. I don't want to die to Sphinx or Foresight. Right, I can beat your combo, and then this is the card that's going to beat everything else in your deck.
But even then, you definitely don't. Yeah, I think you at least trim 1 and probably 2 copies. You've got Shark Typhoon to gum up the board. You've got Teferi as well to clean up some creatures here and there. Cast Out in a pinch as well. I don't know. Maybe. Look, I'm going to defer to Magni here. He's played this list a lot more than probably you or I. But that amount of creature removal seemed a little sus.
So, yeah. I mean, he's played it a lot, but I'm sure, again, he hasn't played versus this deck very much. So he's still experimenting with it, right? I believe this is a matchup there, you know, now that deck lists are public, if we see, I believe these players cannot play again in the same format, but if we see them going in the top 8, this is a matchup that they'll devote a lot of resources to, because it's a matchup that neither of them have played before.
Yeah, exactly. Paradise Jordan turn 2 here for Michael Jacob. You can see that he's brought in his copy of By Force. Doesn't want to have to grant it for that. Wants to be able to cast it at a moment's notice. And is this Shark Typhoon going to be cycled away? No, it's not. Interesting. It's now an option here to keep up Absorb, or play the Irrigated Tapland and just keep up Dovin's Veto. I mean, Dovin's Veto keeps you safe from the combo next turn.
It is a bit surprising to me that it wasn't cycled, because Luca Magni really wants to hit his land drops, but at the same time, he is facing down a 2/1 creature, right? So getting a 1/1 blocker out of the deal is very valuable. So he's probably just waiting for that.
Yeah, probably just waiting to have 3 mana to dump into it there. Finds the Seagate Stormcaller, no luck with the Neo forms, draws a Dual Caster Mage instead, and it's got that Sphinx of Foresight here. But of course, Magni is packing those counterspells, ready to go. Dovin's Veto, Essence Scatter, even a Mystical Dispute here to take care of anything that Jacob plays. So I don't imagine that anything's going to resolve unless Magni explicitly decides that it's a card that he can beat. I mean, maybe if your opponent plays the Sphinx of Foresight, you go, yep, sure, that's fine. I've got a Wrath of God. I can deal with that in due course.
He would probably still just counter that, to be honest, because he's constrained on mana, right? He doesn't want to tap out for Wrath of God and then die.
Yeah.
And he has so many counter spells. So I assume he's going to counter anything that moves here. Like, unless it's, Dual Caster Mage as a 2/2, I believe he's
main phase, just Grey Ogre mode engaged. Go.
And here we see, this is actually a very big difference between Michael Jacobs' list and Kaneko Hero Engineer Naga that we saw in the previous round, right?
Yeah.
Because Kaneko Hero has a cyber plan for matchups like this.
Yes.
He has 3 Nightpack Ambush, he has Brazen Borer, he has 4 Mystical Dispute, has Negate. So he's transforming his deck and presenting a different problem to an opponent like Lokomine is, right? Well, you can deal with my combo, but I can also play this flash game, right? It kind of turns into Timur Flash while maintaining the combo. But Michael Jacob has Fail Wishes in his deck. So his sideboard is a bunch of one-off answers, right? And while that is very good in some spots, it really hurts him in a matchup like this, where he would like the ability to change gears with the counter spells and the Nightpack Ambushes.
But
so his deck is still very one-dimensional.
I think, sort of as we explore that point you're making there, that's probably a very deliberate choice, because again, I don't think that Azorius Control was on the top, like on the high on the list of cards of decks that Jacob wanted to beat there. But it sort of comes back to a point that I made earlier when we were watching Yukihiro play his deck. We haven't got the best version of this list yet. We're watching this. I mean, this is historic in the making, if you like, because we're watching what may be a real contender in this format take shape, spread its beautiful wings and fly. And people are still figuring out what the best version of the deck is as we go.
Yeah, for sure. There's so many different cards that you can play, so many different styles, right? Which is funny because a lot of the time combo decks, they're like, oh, this combo deck, it demands 56 slots. And then you have 4 that you can mix and match however you want, right? This is not the case here. This is like, well, this has 48 slots that you have to play, and the other 12 you do whatever you want, and this player chose to do stuff that's radically different. So maybe one version will emerge as the best, and maybe it will be a mix of the two, or something completely different.
Right now, though, I mean, it looks like Magni has just been running rings around Michael Jacob. We're going to see, look, this game was just kind of like, just a lot of nothing happened. Magni was able to hold on a handful of counter spells, and with instant speed shark tokens, was just able to take over the game completely there, Peter.
Yeah, this was a game where Michael Jacob just didn't do his thing, right? He hit his fail rate, basically, so.
That's it. So that is that for this game, and indeed that match, my friends. We're going to go to a break. We've got more Magic coming your way after it, so do stick around. We'll see you back here live for more action from the 2020 season grand finals in just a few moments.
You gotta, babe. Breathe a little air. Bring life into your muscles. Instinct for a living man. Oh, but there is one thing you're all forgetting. That endless morning will turn to night. And when you're dreaming, you will be seeing a little demon dancing. It's funny how you keep running away from slumber, although you can't. And when you're dreaming, you will be seeing a little demon dancing around. Baby, there is only one way, and that's the slow decay. Get a little earthy with me, I'll pull you down like rain. So tired, I can tell from your shape. Feeling sleepy, yeah, you can beat the slow decay.
I'm Sam Sherman. I'm 32 years old from the United States.
I am Levy. I'm 39 years old, and I'm from France.
Welcome back to live coverage of the 2020 season grand finals, everyone. My name's Riley Knight, joined by the Hall of Famer Rafael Levy. Another Hall of Famer. There's plenty of them in this tournament. Joined by Palovita Dama de Rosa, and Rafael Levy is the Hall of Famer that is going to be playing on your screen against Sam Sherman. These guys tested together, it's my understanding, and so they are playing what I believe is, if it's not exactly, it's close to a 75-card mirror. As I cast my eyes over the list, I think it is indeed a 75-card mirror match. This is basically, PV, Sultai mid-range, although they're splashing white for Yashan, the big pig.
Yeah, and they did test together. And if you're wondering how this somewhat unlikely pairing came to be, right? How did these two players end up testing together? That is because, well, Luis Scott-Vargas wanted to test with Gabriel Nassif and with Matt Nass, and Matt Nass wanted to test with Ben White, and Ben White's is Stunt Termina's roommate, and Rafael Levy is big friends with Gabriel Nassif, so that is how the six of them ended up testing together. You're wondering how that came to be. But yeah, this is, it is a matchup where their splash isn't really going to hurt or help anybody, right? Because the card just doesn't do much, but both players have it. And yeah, it should play out like the Sultai mirrors of old.
Yes, indeed. And as you can see, Levy has already taken game number one. We are coming into post-sideboard games here between these two players. Levy won quite a marathon, game one, I'm told. It was 17 minutes long here. And so we can settle in for another... it's going to be probably a pretty grindy slugfest here by the look of things. Both of these players have got, some decent action in hand, but these grindy mid-range decks do tend to slug towards the late game pretty reliably here, PV.
Yeah, and I actually think that in a matchup like this, some games go super long, right? Some games, it's really just you trade, and whoever has the last thing left standing wins 20 minutes later, which is probably what happened game one. But some of the games, you just get out ahead of your opponent, and then you play a Nisa when they have like 3 lands in play and nothing else, and then you just take complete control of the game. Right?
Another whip. Whiff alert once again as Narset this time fails to find anything at all off the top of the library, and you do hate to see that. So that's an unfortunate state of affairs for Sam Sherman. Although the Narset static is, of course, very relevant in a matchup where people are playing Uro, people are playing Hydroid Krasis. So even if that Narset hasn't gotten full retail, the 2 cards off the top you'd hope. Let's see if we can get the Shark Typhoon this time, so no worries there. Just it's sticking around in the face of an opposing card like Hydroid Krasis here for the French Hall of Famer.
Yeah, and it is just an extremely strong card.
We'll see exactly how Raf is going to deal with this Narset. And
here
exactly
is
what Sherman wants to do in this position. He'll know, of course, that Levy could be sitting on something like an Aether Gust. In fact, he knows that the Aether Gust is in hand. It has been revealed. So slamming in Nissa, that is hardly an attractive proposition, especially when you've got Shark Typhoon in hand. Nice little instant speed play to make at the end of your turn. But, look, Raf has come Vargle. And so shoves the Nissa. He's going to get away with it too. So here's the answer to the Narset as the 3/3 can come across and clip the wings of the Parter of Veils.
Yeah, I mean, the Shark Typhoon is also face up, right?
Waking up probably round Kataku, which is going to get in for 3. And Levy seems to be considering maybe going upstairs with this attack. He's certainly hitting the tank here. Well, is he going to hit the Narset, or is he going to hit the tank? Well, the Sherman tank, that is. Ayo! We got there. Here's a Shark Typhoon. Now, this may... change things here as we see a 3/3 dominate the battlefield, and that means that Rafael Levy's forbearance here was well and truly justified. Nissa comes down upstairs, wakes up an island, and now Sherman is going to get on the front foot and start to attack.
Yeah, and really this is a spot where I think Raph was heavily punished by playing 4 colors,
6 damage
right? Because
coming across.
He didn't.
And Levy here with the option to trade off the lands, and I'm interested to see if he's going to take this opportunity. I mean, he loses his Nissa if he doesn't. Sherman actually thinking better of the attack here. Interesting kind of dance being done by these two players here as they consider their options.
Okay, I suspect Riley cannot hear me, so I'm going to investigate what's happening and let him take it from here. I sure hope he can't hear me. But anyway, yeah, this was a spot where I think Raph was heavily punished by playing 4 colors, right? Because that land that he couldn't tap is not a blue-green dual land. If there was a blue-green dual land, he could just untap it and play Aether Gust, right? And answer his opponent's Nissa at the same time as deploying his own. As it isn't, he had to choose between playing his own Nissa or stopping his opponent's, right? So the game would be totally different at that point.
So it looks like this 3-3 has been committed to the attack now. And we'll see what Levy wants to do about this. Of course, a delicate balance to be struck between offense and defense here, especially when you're taking care of your own planeswalkers. And we are going to see the trade here. So Nissa will live to fight another day in the... oh, no, maybe not. Okay, well, look at this. Twists and turns all over the place here as we navigate the turgid waters of this combat step. And it's interesting to see that, of course, even if these Nissas bite the dust, there are backup Nissas in hand for both players.
Yeah, no, it is. This is one of those game states where, you know, both players have Nissa and both players are like, well, do I want to trade my land for the other player's land? Because I know how important the land is for me, but how important is the land for my opponent? Right. So it is quite tricky to navigate these game states. They do have mostly the same things, with some Sherman having a little bit extra here, right? So he's in a slightly better shape. And that Narset, of course, that Levy still hasn't managed to kill yet, is stopping the Uro and the Krasins from gaining full value, right? Whereas Levy does not have the Narset on his side, so Sim Sherman is free to tap out and play his stuff.
So now, Levy hitting the rope here. He's considering what he wants to do. Got that Uro in hand, another powerful Simic card in Hydroid Krasis. And certainly this game is proceeding at a slower pace to what you'd expect. We're going to just see a replacement Nissa here? My goodness. Yeah, all right. So a new Nissa coming down to replace the first.
Strange and magnificent world.
In order to continue to develop the board here. Let's find out what Rap's doing. Certainly taking his time in doing it. Complicated, a delicate position here. A delicate situation.
The land fights for us.
Yeah, and I mean, it is... Raph Levy is just running out of lands, right? He will finally get an Narset off the board. And then he can either gust his opponent's Nissa, which is going to put him in a pretty good spot. But he is going to lose his last remaining Greenland to do that. So it suddenly doesn't come without cost. And then it will really be up to whether Sim Sherman can draw another land, right? Because if Sim Sherman can draw another land here, he gets to slam another Nissa. And then I don't think Raph has what he needs to do to be able to deal with that, right? Because he doesn't have any lands. If he doesn't draw it, then, well, he might just be dead to that Nissa in a couple of turns, right? So it's a really big draw step for Sim Sherman there.
Back over to now. Back over to Sherman here, who finds, an Aether Gust off the top. These dueling Nissas. Levy just down to 3 lands, however. But, yes, also in the draw step here, an Aether Gust to take care of the opposing Nissa. Now, Sherman is not going to be able to cast the one that is in his hand as it stands now because he's down to 4 lands here. But what's the response to this Aether Gust? You can cycle the Shark Typhoon, hope to find something.
Yeah, and here in this spot, I mean, Sim Sherman didn't draw a land for Nissa, which would have been the best, but I think he drew the second best, right, which was an answer to his opponent's Nissa. Now, Raph Levy doesn't have a Nissa and doesn't have a forest. And he didn't draw a forest, right? We're probably going to see this Shark Typhoon being cycled right now because maybe he draws a land that enters play tap, right? He has to do it now. He can't wait. But we're back in the same spot where if some Sherman, oh sorry, yeah, he plays the Uru instead, which again, draws a card. Is better than playing the Typhoon. But Sam Sherman is on the top deck mode, right? He wants to draw a land here to play his Nissa. And I'm surprised actually that he didn't cycle the Shark Typhoon there, because drawing a land for him would be really, really huge. So this is a spot in which I think he would be better just spinning a card, basically, to try to get this tempo advantage. But he didn't, and he didn't draw a land. So now he's sort of in the back foot again. He's still fine. He has at least 2 turns before Levy can deploy his next important threat, which is the Nissa, right? It's a little bit far away, 2 green mana away. But I think a little bit of a greedy play from Sir Sherman there. And he's going to end up cycling it on his main phase, just getting a 2/2. And if he draws a land here, he's going to be punishing himself. He didn't, so he wasn't punished by not cycling at the end of the turn, right? But still, it really surprised me that he didn't do that. And now we're...
So here's the attack now with Watery Grave. And the choice to chump block here with this 2/2. What an interesting game. This game is just so... It's very... I mean, Levy down to just 2 non-creature lands here. Does have the plains, however. Both players with an enormous amount of firepower, but neither really in a position to kind of deploy it particularly effectively. There's a Crisis for 2 on the table, a Thoughtseize, or you can hold that Shark Typhoon and cycle that. Very decision-intense games here. A lot of different things. I mean, this is some real wrinkle brain stuff, Lola. Take it from me. As a man with a fractally wrinkled brain, such as myself, I can tell you there's some real wrinkles in this one, like a walnut, my friends. So Thoughtseize. And again, look at that firepower. Let's see what Levy's going to go after here. And the Thoughtseize now, well, looks like Nissa may be the pick here. We'll see. We may have Polo back. Polo, mate.
Hello.
I think we may have Polo back here. I do apologize, my friend, for talking over you. I didn't even realize I was doing it. Couldn't hear you, my friend, but looks like we might be back here.
It's okay. I forgive you.
That's all I wanted in life was the forgiveness of Polo Vita Damina Rosa. Now an extinction event. Look at this. Just a 4-mana Stone Rain.
Yeah, well, it's a 4-mana race, right? Because you have to sacrifice the creature too. So it's even worse than a 4-mana Stone Rain. But I mean, it does stop Ralph Havley from accomplishing anything.
Yeah. We see Shark Typhoon now making a 1/1 Shark, and Levy finds a land in the form of Zagoth Triome here. But a super weird game, certainly between these two players so far.
Yeah, I mean, and this is a game where I think maybe both players were kind of punished for having this white mana, right? Because if we look at Ralph Levy's board, he has no green mana. His deck is base green. Green is the most important color in his deck. He has 3 white mana in play, right? If that Yasharn wasn't part of the list, how many of those would be green sources instead, right? Probably at least 2, right? So we're seeing a really, really big punishment by this white splash.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like the white splash is obviously what you feel like a 200 IQ genius when you're sitting down against Jund Sacrifice for playing the big pig in your deck. But in a situation like this, you look at this basic planes, you just want to put it through the shredder. Like it's such a bad card in this position here.
It really, really is. Yeah. And, in this game, it feels like we're back where we started, right? Because a lot of things happened from turn 4 on. But if you just looked at this particular game state, you could think it's turn 4, right? Both players have 4 or 5 lands in play, couple cards in hand. You know what Nar said? You wouldn't know that 5 Nissas have already been played this game or something.
Yeah, I guess like the only thing is like one of the players on 9. But apart from that, this could just be like the opening turns of the game, right?
Yeah, and this happens sometimes, right? When the Nissa lands just trade into each other, so the players kind of constrained on mana, and then the Nissas die or get Aether Gusted or something like that. It's not very common. I don't think that the game develops this way. I think a lot of the time a player just has an advantage and runs away with it, right? I think this is what would have happened if Raphael Levy had a blue-green duel the turn he played Nisa, right, I think this game would already be over.
Yeah, rather than waking up that
wasn't.
ground catacomb, if he'd woken up like the Sultai Triome there, or the or a breeding pool, for example, it would have been very different indeed. You're right. Yeah.
Yeah. So it is also interesting to me that both these players have extinction events. Right, it's a card that when I was playing that matchup, I didn't like very much. Because obviously, I don't think you're trying to just kill your opponent's creatures, right? I don't think that is really what the game is about. But both of them have it, and they tested together, so they must have concluded that this was a good choice. And it's also kind of ironic because they are the only players in this tournament playing this deck, right? This deck is the third most played deck in the field.
Yeah.
I think it's like 20% of the field. But it's still just one team. So whatever it is that they came up with for the mirror, they didn't really need to because they're the only ones playing.
Yeah, exactly,
right?
Yeah.
So whatever, super plans you have or whatever super spicy sideboard tech you have, you really didn't need to have it. Because
your opponent's on exactly the same level as you. Yeah, for sure. Here's Uro now. And you can see one of the things that really sets this deck apart is it's just a very extremely high power level of the cards that some decks rely on synergy. Some decks have cards that, when brought together, are greater than the sum of their parts. But this is a deck where it will just trade one. We call these decks, even though this isn't a Jund deck, we call these decks Jund decks basically because they're built in a certain way. They want to trade one for one for one for one for one, all the way through, recharge with cards like Uro, like Hydroid Krasis, and eventually win with single cards that can win the game on their own. I'm talking about Nissa. I'm talking about Uro. Rather than, for example, Muxus, which requires you to play a bunch of other, in a vacuum, underpowered cards. There's not a lot of. There's some, but like this is not a synergy-based deck. It's not a synergy-driven deck. It's a good stuff deck.
Oh yeah, I mean it is. I understand it has been pointed out that these are green triomes, so everything that I said was wrong. I apologize for that. But yes, I definitely agree with you that this is a Jund deck, right? This is, even though obviously it's not literally a Jund deck, this is exactly how a Jund deck plays, right? This is not a Sultai deck in the traditional sense that it's trying to play counter spells and stuff. It really is just trying to thought seize you and then kill your creatures and then play a threat that is going to take over the game, right? Like a Nissa or an Uro.
And so decks, this puts it in a good position against other Thoughtseize decks. It puts it in a good position against other decks that are also looking to play a grindy attrition-based game. And in the mirror, I mean, this is why we've seen this marathon-like game that's gone on for a very long time indeed. It's because both of these decks are more or less equally well armed, and so I've got a lot of work to do to get anywhere near some kind of advantage. Although at the moment, certainly the wind seems to be in Levy's sails. He's got the active Nissa. He's got an Uro on board, ready to go. Hydroid Krasis can perhaps come over and threaten that Nissa a little bit.
Yeah, and this is a deck that has more answers than threats, right? This is basically an answer deck that is trying to win off one threat. So when your opponent is also an answer deck, then you just have more answers than threats from both sides. So it's really hard for someone to stick a threat for long enough to win the game, right? Luckily, Uro is somewhat of an unanswerable threat. You can Extinction Event it, right? It does get rid of it forever. But I think that is the only permanent answer to it. So
yeah, I don't think these decks are playing Ugins or anything else like that, which of course would be another way to get rid of it for good. No.
Yeah, exactly. There's no unanswerable threat, right? You don't have any hexproof creature that they can't remove or anything like that. So yeah, if both players have an answer heavy draw and no one can get ahead of each other, then you're gonna get to these game states.
So Uro, removed from Levy's side of the battlefield, but now comes to us on Sam Sherman's side. Escaped from the graveyard.
Yeah, we're probably going to see the Extinction Event there from... Oh, we have very rare.
Typhoon, yes.
Yeah, and that is a threat that is actually very hard to answer.
It really is.
I believe...
in a position like this, especially as you're getting rid of your opponent's Uro with that Extinction Event here, getting a 4/4 out of the deal is very good, and that's the sort of card that it doesn't take very long for a Shark Typhoon to win the game if left unanswered.
No, it definitely doesn't. And I believe there's only one answer in the deck. I think that is the Black Mythos of Netherite. That does answer any permanent, but I don't know if there is another one. So if the game is going to go long, that card will definitely win Levy the game, right? Unless he just floods horribly from here on out. Every spell that he draws will do something.
Yeah, even a Growth Spiral gets a little 2/2 flyer to go with it, something like that, something that would otherwise be kind of air, and Eliminate is going to do good work. Anything, an Ether Gust. So even the Nissa here now from Sam Sherman, it may be a little late. It may not be able to sort of repair this issue, as we see another Hydroid Crisis.
Yeah, the Hydroid Crisis is pretty good here. Right, it will deal with all of the Shark tokens for the time being. And Levy does have a sweeper there, but it will literally sweep the entire board, right?
Yeah, even with these extinction events, it's a very much an all or nothing situation here with these extinction events.
Yeah, and he will get a token when he plays it, but that will also immediately die, right? So he really just resets the board.
All right, so extinction event, breeding pool in hand here for Levy. Looking a little better. Sam Sherman's hand here with 2 Growth Spirals in addition to a Triumph, which of course can be cycled away should the need arise. So really, as you said, it's about Levy not just flooding out. He certainly didn't draw well this turn, but if you can continue to find, these Growth Spirals, anything else that is going to trigger the Shark Typhoon, he's going to be in a better spot.
Yeah, I mean, he has the advantage here, I think, but at the same time, on the board, right? But we know he doesn't have much in hand, and his opponent has 4 cards, right? Even if they just all cycle, it's not really a super winning proposition for Levy here. And he's Nissa Zone 2 only, right? So if he passes the turn, then his opponent can maybe just attack with the Hydro Crazes, and then he has to chump block it with multiple things for the Nissa to not die, right? So he is actually in trouble here.
So no attacks, decides against casting. You could see that he was thinking about casting that extinction event. Ooh, there's an Ether Gust.
He could also cast it for odd, right, and just get a 4/4.
Just a 4-mana 4/4 flyer.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, it wouldn't be the worst, right? Because I think Sam Sherman might just attack the Nissa here.
Yeah.
And Levy can block with the 4/4 and just chump it, right, and then you keep the Nissa at 1, but he still just loses his biggest creature, right? Whereas if he had another 4/4 token, he could double block.
Well, Sherman also has the option to remove the Nissa entirely by attacking with both Hydroid Crazies. Gonna go for a Growth Spiral here, finds a forest, puts it into play straight away.
Yeah, I think attacking with both Crazes is kind of like put yourself too vulnerable to things, because your opponent can just eat the 3/3 Crazes, let the Nissa go, right? And then you're in 10 life, right? So I look at this game and I see 2 avenues for Ref Levy to win, right? The first one is the game goes super long and the Shark Typhoon that is in play will win him the game, right? And the second avenue is, I'm just going to kill my opponent. My opponent's at 10. Right, so I don't know if there's a Neuro in the graveyard that can come back. It doesn't look like there is.
No, there's not.
So at this point, it is a tricky balance for Sam Sherman, right? Because he has to play around both these choices.
Well, here, after that attack, which was a good one, we're going to now see an extinction event to clear both sides.
And that does stop the, I'm at 10 life. I might just die to your lands here. It just cuts off that possibility, right?
Mm-hmm. Ooh, and a Shark Typhoon for Sam as well. And I think he's going to be able to cast it. He's going to be able to hard cast it as well. How about that?
Oh, I don't think he will. I honestly think he was just going to wait and make a very large creature next turn.
Oh, dear. And Levy can't catch a break, finding a Fabled Passage off the top.
Yeah, I mean, Levy doesn't have many good draws here. No. He does have that Shark Typhoon, but I don't think it's going to be enough. Because Sam Sherman is going to make a humongous creature at the end of the turn, and he's going to have the Narset, and he has that Ether Gust. So...
I train every day. No one is more prepared than
Definitely a very tricky spot, and yeah, I believe St. Sherman is going to take this game at this point. I don't know if there's anything that Ralph Levy can really do.
Yeah, and then has to win another one after that, if indeed he wins this one, because don't forget, this is game number 2 here. Rafael Levy won game number 1, 17-minute slog, and this one's also gone on for quite some time. You can see both players now, their clock's active. Ralph's got about 8 minutes left. Sam just under 10. This wakes up another land. 6 damage coming across here. Not anything that the French Hall of Famer can do about that.
Yeah, and this has been a very long game, right? Not only were the games super long, but the players certainly took their time in some of these decisions, which admittedly were very complicated, right? But it does have an impact in how you're playing the next game, because they've already played 2 games and they've both been quite long, right? So sometimes someone just runs away with the game. But when that doesn't happen, then what are you really going to do? Right? Are you going to be able to win a super drawn-out game when you have 5 minutes in your clock? Probably not. No.
So here, I mean, if Levy thought he was just dead to rights, he would certainly concede at this point to just save as much clock time as possible. But obviously, he thinks he's still got a bit of a chance.
Honestly, if I'm Levy here, what I would do is probably just cast that extinction event, name Odd, and get my 4/4 flyer.
Yeah.
That would be disastrous because Sherman would just make a bigger flyer, but you don't know that that is in your opponent's hand, right? And I think that is the only way you can maybe win the game. You don't win that game by just sweeping the board.
And that is the end of game number 2 here, as Sam Sherman wins in, again, quite a long one it was there. But now we go to the sideboards for the 3rd and final game of this match. This is round 2, of course, of the 2020 season grand finals. Riley Knight joined by the Hall of Famer Paulo Vida Dama de Rose, the Brazilian superstar. Great to have your company from around the world, wherever you are. Thanks for tuning in and exploring this historic format with us, of course. And to remind you, coming up later on, we've got one more round of historic, and then we're going to jump into standard. So we do hope you'll stick around. Marshall and Paul are going to be joining you in the booth before very much longer. So mark your dance cards, my friends, because for the rest of the weekend, we will be playing Magic at the very highest level here. As some of the greatest players in the world duke it out. They've qualified from the Mythic Invitational, from the Players Tour Finals. And this is going to be a great opportunity for either a newer, fresher, younger player to come and make a name for themselves in the highest level, or for an old guard, a veteran, to add another impressive title to their CV. We'll see how it goes. But at the moment, looks like we're just about ready to jump back into game number 3 of this match between Rafael Levy and Sam Sherman. They tested together, as we talked about before. They're playing the same 75.
Yeah, and this matchup really is what you talked about, right? It is a super veteran versus a super new player, at least relatively speaking, right? So, because we saw that Sam Sherman has been playing since, 98. That's older than a lot of our viewers, right? But he's really just broken into the competitive scene recently, right? Yes. His first big accomplishment, I think, was building the Sultai food deck that was so dominant during the last PT that we had with Richmond, when Andrei Strasky won. But not the traditional Sultai food, right? Everyone had the traditional Sultai food. The version that he built was the one with the Trail of Crumbs and the Massacre Girl. That was actually the only deck that beat the Mirror, right? So that was his deck, and that is how he kind of made a name for himself. And probably the first that the Magic world heard of him, right? And that was just last year.
So if the races now, with these two players getting stuck into the 3rd game, Levy opens things up with a growth spiral. Let's see if there's an increase in the pace of play here, because now I think the clocks are actually are going to become increasingly relevant as time goes on here. So Levy at the moment about 1.5 minutes behind the pace, so he may want to pick it up a little bit. Because, I mean, to explain what would happen in paper, this would be a situation where once you run out of time is called, you get 5 extra turns, and if there's no result, it's a draw. We don't have draws. Whoever's clock hits 0 first, doesn't matter if you're on 1,000,000 life and your opponent's on 1, doesn't matter if you're attacking for lethal when your clock goes off. If you hit 0 minutes, 0 seconds, that's it. That's all she wrote today, sports fans. The game is over for you. So there is certainly an incentive to be the one ahead on the chess clock. And at the moment, I think Levy will be, that'll be something that's on his mind here as he's playing this game, that he will want to pick up the pace a little bit, because as you can see, he's just about 2 minutes behind.
Yeah, and here we see, Elder Gargroth is a card. Is this a time consideration from Sherman, right? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know if he had it in game 2 or not. We didn't get to see it, right? He played a pretty long game. So maybe he's thinking, I might need to close out this game sooner than I wanted. So maybe that's a card that he has. And the time constraint, it's not really about running out of time. It's about the threat of running out of time that makes you play differently, right?
Yeah,
so when you start thinking and you're like, well,
Yeah.
I can't think more here. I need to make a play because I'm running out of time. And then you make the wrong play, right? You play a little bit more aggressively than you would. You take more risks because you can't be patient. And that is just really bad when you're playing a deck like this.
Yes, of course. I mean, we mentioned before, this is a decision-intensive deck. There's a lot going on, a lot of factors to consider, a lot of angles, and a lot of, I guess, a lot of opportunities to make mistakes. You know, just as many as there are to make good decisions. If you stuff it all up beyond belief, you're going to be paying the price.
Yeah, for sure. And here, Levy could have untapped a different land and bluffed an Aethergust of some sort. Right, but decided that it's just not worth it. And if he is going to lose a land in the combat here, he would much rather it be this one, right? Because he has no white cards in his deck anymore, right? He sideboarded out all the pigs, so this is basically an island for him.
And this is something that we see pretty typically with Nissa when you don't have anything that you want to cast, so you're not untapping your breeding pool. You generally will untap, and we're seeing it here again, the least valuable land because of a situation like this. And I think Levy untapping that Glacial Fortress indicates that he's ready to defend the Nissa, and so I wouldn't be surprised to see a trade here at all. And that comes back to what we were saying. These players animating the least useful land, the one that they're the happiest to see leave the battlefield, and that makes sense because the rest of Levy's lands are, of course, forests.
Yeah, and this trade is almost forced, right? Because if you don't take it, you cannot stop your opponent from taking it the following turn unless you just don't attack, right? Which is often pretty awkward. So this trade almost always happens. It's very rare that it doesn't happen.
Here's that classic 1-2 punch that you love to see. We're seeing Hydroid Krasis after a Nissa, and with 6 forests in play, it's going to be a very big one. X equals 8. That's 4 fresh cards. And still leaving up Aethergust here, or there's the opportunity to Thoughtseize the opponent after an attack.
Yeah, unfortunately, he cannot do both, right? Even though he does have access to 3 mana, the mana doesn't work out in a way where he can do both. But he will still be pretty happy with either choice, right? I think he's just in a really, really good spot here.
And going upstairs with the attack as well, rather than going after the opposing Nissa here.
Well, now he gets to play the Thoughtseize and play the Gust. He will not be able to play it on the draw step, right? Which is traditionally what you want to do. But I think he's far ahead enough that if Sherman's next turn is spent just playing Nissa, he's not going to win, right? So I quite like this play from Raf Levy. It's recognizing that, I'm going to deviate from the normal pattern of play, which would be to play this Aethergust on the draw step, and just do it immediately because my opponent has no good answers, right? If they put it on top, they're just dead by my next turn, right? They have to bottom it and hope to draw something miraculous, which I don't even know is in their deck.
Well, something like an Extinction Event would turn the clock back a little bit here, but that's a good point that you make. It is an unorthodox line of play there, but something that is really good is obviously to use all your mana every turn, and that's exactly what Levy did there. That was a very powerful turn for Levy, making an 8-8, drawing 4 cards, and then immediately playing 2 of them as well. Here's Uro from the bin, and this can stabilize the ground a little bit, but you've still got to deal with that 8-8 Trampling Flyer.
Well, and that Nissa, right? That is generating a ton of mana. It's ready to ultimate next turn, right? It's going to +1 again now, and next turn is already threatening ultimate. So, yeah, I mean, Uro is good, but it's not going to get you out of it, especially with all the Shark Typhoons.
Yeah, double
Right,
Shark
Wrath
Typhoon in hand here.
Could legitimately just play the 2 Shark Typhoons here, I think.
Just play play them as 6-drop enchantments.
He could, yeah, he could play both, right? But instead, he could also just go Shark Typhoon and Narset and eliminate, or just use it to cycle and make a token. So the world is his oyster, really.
Yeah,
here.
this eliminate is a fantastic draw as well because it enables an attack with the 2 Nissa lands as well. So you're putting out a lot of damage here. 14 damage can come across.
Yeah, and the Uro wasn't even threatening because of the Narset, right, at this point anymore. And really, there are no wrong plays for Levy here. I think he could
Just click the glowing
cover his
card, right?
eyes and throw cards at Hando, Chaos Orb style, and he would probably still win.
Yep, just
You know,
engage.
sometimes they eliminate
card
Lands
mode.
of the Crisis and bad beats, but and he would probably still win anyway.
Oh dear. All right, across for 14 now. Looks like Sam Sherman may go down here. Something like an Extinction Event off the top would certainly do something, but here's an Uro now, escaped, and so even Extinction Event's not going to be enough as this 6/6 can come across and clean up the game next turn. Draws a card off the top. Double Shark Typhoon, another Nissa. It's all coming up Levy. And we're going to see a swift concession from Sam Sherman. So well done to the French Hall of Famer, who, after a long, protracted battle in games 1 and 2, PV managed to pull it together pretty quickly in game number 3.
Yeah, no, that was a pretty different game from the ones that we saw, the one that we saw previously, right? But that is honestly how I think most games in this matchup go, right? Someone gets an Issa early and then just runs away with the game.
Yep, that's how it goes a lot of the time, and I'm sure we'll see more of this in the future. But right now, we're going to get a quick break, my friends. We won't be gone for long, and be sure to stick around, because after this break, we'll be back at the desk, and then there's more magic coming your way live from the 2020 Season Grand Final.